Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Most of you know who I am, but for those of you who don't know who I am, today I am your professor, Krimson Kreamer, and welcome to this very special live episode of Krimson University. Early stream height. Is a red pen okay? Yes it is, Dustin Collins, yes it is. Hello, Epic. How's it going? And hello, Papa Agron, as well. Guys, thank you guys so much for coming out. I really do appreciate it. We got 5 people in here already. Let's go. And I am very excited to be bringing this to you guys because over the past couple of days, actually, technically this past week, past month, me and my friend, Bat Joe Beyond, you've seen him on the channel a couple times. Me and him have been getting back into playing YuGiOh, but we've also been getting back into playing it a little bit more competitively. The first tournament we went to, we were like, alright, we're going to sit down, we're going to play, we're going to have some fun, and we got wiped. The floor got swept out from underneath us, but rather than having that get us down, we pushed harder. We decided to not really learn the game, but we relearned the new meta. We looked into what we could do to improve our skills. The next tournament we went to, I won one match, he won one match. I did a little bit better than I did last time, but then I only tried to push myself even more. Then this past weekend happened, and the local card store that I go to was holding the Worlds tournament there, and the only issue with that is that I was expecting it to be next weekend because that's where a lot of other venues were having it, was next weekend, not this weekend. So the cards that I was ordering that were supposed to come in this next week didn't come in, and I really tried to compete well enough, but unfortunately my decks were just not holding up. I was missing cards, I couldn't OHKO, so I pretty much just left the tournament in defeat. But honestly, it's no big deal. I still had a lot of fun. I met a lot of cool people. And honestly, the experience only makes me feel like that I'm going to be getting better and better at the game to the point where I can actually now win tournaments. I'm very close to having a winning deck build. But as of right now, we just got to wait a couple more days for these cards to come in. But anyway, guys, we are going to get started with this lesson. Now, if you guys don't know what YuGiOh is a trading card game all the way back in like 2000 and like 2002, 2001, like around that generation. I was very young when I was playing it. Actually, it was even older. I would have to say like in 3rd grade for me. So that would be, yeah, that'd have to be like 2001, 2002. When YuGiOh was starting to come around. I remember the first card that I ever got was a Blue Eyes White Dragon. And it was, at that time, that was the most grandest card there is. Now it's not even looked at as a, gotta bounce my dude, gonna go record. Alrighty, Papa Agron, I'll see you later. Thank you so much for stopping by. So basically, it's an old card game, and they've changed a lot in the card game. The field is different, the cards that they use are different. There's a ban list. You can't use certain things. But today's lesson, guys, we're going to be going over these new rules, the official rules, version 10 rules of the Shonen Jump YuGiOh trading card game made by Konami. And this is the official rulebook that we're going to be looking at. So this is like the rulebook that you are going to like get. Like whenever you start to play YuGiOh, this is what you look up. And rather than just be like, yo, go look up the rulebook, we'll do a live stream where I'll go over it, discuss it with you guys, and then afterwards, if you guys have any questions that you want to write down in the chat or via call me on Discord, I'll have a call open up on my Discord server. I'll drop a link for that when that time comes. You will have a one-on-one with me, asking me a question, back out so that way someone else can come in. Basically, it's going to be one question per person. Also, try to keep it down to, don't try to come in here and try to do, like, shout-outs or anything in that call because you will be banned. And I don't appreciate that. We're trying to keep the discussions to YuGiOh and only YuGiOh. But without further ado, guys, let us continue into this lesson in Krimson University and how to play the YuGiOh trading card game. Now, the first thing that you guys want to know about the game is, what is the trading card game? We basically went over that. But basically how the game is played is that you use a variety of monsters, spells, and traps and try to just defeat your opponent by getting their life points down to 0. Now, when you start the game, each player starts off with 8,000 life points, and like I said, you want to try to get it down to... Bleh, I tired. Hi, Shiny. I'm going to try to get their life points down to 0 from 8,000 to 0. Honestly, you can either do... Basically, the way that you can build your deck is that you can go out, buy a structure deck, buy packs, and honestly, also just looking up to see what you can build into. Now, let us get into the getting started section of the book. The things that you need is a deck. Now, a deck is mostly comprised of 40 to 60 cards. You can have up to 3 copies of the same card in your deck, extra deck, and side deck combined. There are also cards that are forbidden, limited, and semi-limited in official tournaments. What that means is that there are cards out there that you cannot have in your deck, cards that you can only have 1 in your deck, and cards that you can have 2 in your deck. Forbidden is you can't have it in your deck, limited is you can have 1 in your deck, and semi-limited is that you can have 2 in your deck. You also want to try to keep it to a 40 card minimum, because it just works better overall when you're trying to play a specific set in your deck that you want to try to get you want to try to have as less cards in your deck as possible. 40 card is the minimum, only because it's easier for you to draw into the cards that you need. I do play... Yo, Justin Collins, my dude, with this $20 donation. Getting started? Okay, let's start the stream off strong. This dude, yes, he is, and we're about to have that grand music play, and I can't wait to hear that shit going. Yes, it is. I love hearing that music so much, my dude. Thank you so much for that $20 donation, my dude. That is super appreciated. Donations are always appreciated and never required. Please do not donate if you're putting you into financial bind. Exactly, Shiny. Thank you for that heads up. You guys are also amazing. Thank you so much. Starting off my day strong as well, my dude. But yeah, like I was saying, 40 card minimum, easier to draw on the cards. I personally will sometimes play up to 45 to 50 just because that's how the cards that I have. Up next for your deck is something separate. It's called your extra deck. Your extra deck consists of XYZ monsters, XYZ monsters, Synchro monsters, and Fusion monsters. Also, Link monsters go in there as well. You can use this during the game to meet certain requirements. You can only have 15 cards in your extra deck, and they are not counted towards your 40 card minimum limit in your main deck. This is my flex zone, bro. And of course, there's also something called the side deck, where you can have 0 to 15 cards as well. Your side deck is basically the extra cards that you have for your deck that aren't going to be played in your deck. You pretty much put these cards to the side, and after a match, you could swap out any of your cards and add any cards, just to basically kind of like, you know, mix and max up your strategy. So it's like, oh, they did this in this duel, in this match, I have something in my side deck that could stop that. The next round, when you can go into your side deck and change it up, basically, then you can throw that in there, and that is what your side deck is for. Also, just as a heads up, there are going to be some things that you're going to need for when you're playing this game. You're going to need some coins, some dice, some counters, monster tokens, also a calculator and card sleeves. Calculator and card sleeves aren't necessarily needed. Calculator honestly helps when you're fucking trying to count in the thousands, and card sleeves helps protect your cards. But the things that you are going to need, though, for this game is coins, dice, counters, and monster tokens. Coin is basically, you know, a coin, a quarter. Flip it, heads, tails. Then the other thing is you're going to need is a dice. A dice is like, you know, the 6-sided dice. What else am I going to do? Counter. Obviously, you're going to need some type of thing to keep counters. Sometimes I'll use poker chips if I don't have my phone on me, because I will tell you guys that I have an app on my phone that definitely helps out with this. And then there's also the monster tokens. Monster tokens are specific cards for Yu-Gi-Oh! That do say tokens on them, and you basically just keep them to the side, so that way if you need something with a token, you can use that. Sometimes I personally will either use my dice or any extra cards that I don't have, like via, like the unplayable god cards, like with their with the not playable god cards, basically the blue, the yellow, and the orange cards that don't have any descriptions on them. I basically use that as a token depending on what deck I'm playing, but sometimes I'll also use like my six-sided dice because I have like a set of I'm trying to find a working ROM of green. Honestly, Shiny, I don't know how to get any ROMs, especially since they stopped bringing up especially since they stopped the downloading of ROMs. I don't really have that. I'm sorry, Shiny. But yeah, like I said, with the monster tokens, basically I'll just use like my extra dice because I have like a set of like 5 dice that I use. And the other thing with the counters is that you also want to probably use like poker chips for that to kind of help out with the counters. I personally use this app on my phone. It's just called the Life Counter app. Basically, it's made by people who know the card game very well. And, you know, it's a really good life point counter. You can have it set up to where it's just for you. I usually have it set up for 2 people because usually I'm playing with 2 people. The other thing is that I also paid for this app to get like the really like cool shit, because it has like all the sound effects and stuff from each of the series. Like right now, what I have on here is I have the classic YuGiOh life point counter, and then I have the YuGiOh GX life point counter, and they both have the sound effects from back when you would use them in the show and stuff. Like that's the classic YuGiOh, and this is the GX one. Like, it has all the classic sound effects. It keeps track. And like I said, you can have it up to 2 people, up to 1 person, and even up to 4 people. You could set your custom life points as however you want. And the other cool feature of this app is that it also has spell counters on it. So you could also keep track of that. It's a really good app. I would highly recommend getting this app if you're going to be playing Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just called Life Counter. It just looks like this, right there in the bottom corner. It looks like that. I have it on iPhone Dollar Store. Has bath things, just acrylic smooth stones on the bottom. Great for counters in any TCG. Okay. Bath bead things. Okay. But yeah, that's what I have personally on my phone. I pretty much just bring this whenever I go to a place. And those are basically the things that you're going to just need before you get into dueling. Is just kind of have these things just set to the side. You don't have to have these things if you don't have them in your deck, but I do recommend getting like at least a coin and some dice, only because when you start a duel, when you start a battle with someone or you want to duel someone, they're usually going to want you to roll dice and choose high or low. But anyway, let's continue on to the game mat. This is what the game mat looks like right now. Basically, it has these 7 different zones. The game mat helps you organize your cards during a duel. When you use your cards, you place them on the game mat. Different kinds of cards are placed in different zones. Each duelist needs their own game mat. Place them together while dueling. This combined space is known as the field. The game mat contained in this product is just for half the field. The cards you control are the cards on your side of the field. You can also duel using the game mat as long as you remember without the game mat so long as you remember where you place the cards. I personally have a couple of game mats. I have the paper ones like they show here. I also have a couple of hardcover ones as well, but I also have a larger like mouse pad game mat where it has both sides of the field, and that really helps when I'm playing against my friends when I have them come over, so that way they don't have to use a game mat. We just have one big game mat that we could use. Yo, what up, Wrecking Ball? How's it going? Actually, let me go grab that for you. Let me go grab the different game mats that I have, so that way you guys can see basically what I'm talking about. I should have had this prepared a little bit earlier, but, you know, Krim don't think ahead. Alright. Hey. Yeah. Don't fall for that. Got it. Alrighty, so this is like one of the normal, like, this is like one of the flat, like, mouse pad gamer mats that I have. It's got the Secret Noble Knights on it. I got it from a Secret Noble Knights set that I got. Yes, because that's what I know you as, Wrecking Ball. And it's just like a standard game mat. I use it as a mouse pad sometimes. But you could still use it like for the gamepad as long as you know where the fields are. Now the next one that I have is a hardcover one that has the fields on it as well. As you could see, oh, that hit my thing here. You can't really see it well on the... like maybe... you could see it like within the Dark Magician or whatever. You could see field card zone and stuff like that. Because it says it all on here. It's just I like this one because it's just a hardcover, and that way it doesn't like bend or break like the wood one, like the paper ones work. And then this is the mat that I was talking about that has both sides of the field. Now this one is a huge ass mat, and it actually holds the cards pretty well on this mat as well. Like even with my sleeves, it still takes up like the full square that the card would take up. So like I got this one on Amazon, and I think it's pretty cool. Okay, shiny. But yeah, this one has everything that you need for the current run of Yu-Gi-Oh! So I would definitely recommend getting this mat. You can get it on Amazon. I think you can get it fairly cheap. I think I got this one for like 10 bucks, or it might be 20 bucks depending on which one you want. But they have a bunch of mats that you can definitely look up, see what you get. Those are the ones that I have personally. But now let's get into what these zones are. Alright, you have Zone 1, your main monster zone. This is where you can put your cards where they are played. You can have up to 5 cards here. There are 3 ways to position your monsters: face up attack position, face up defense position, and face down defense position. Place a card upright for attack and sideways for defense. Up next too is your Spiel, Trap, and Pendulum zone. This is where you put your spell and trap cards. You can have up to 5 cards here. Place them here face up to activate them, or place them face down to set them. Pendulum monster cards can be activated into the left and right of this zone as spells, and cause the zones to become pendulum zones as long as the pendulum monsters are there. We will go over that later on. Yo, what up, Junior? How's it going? Up next is Zone 3, which is the Graveyard. And I should probably go over back to this screen, because I probably made that a little bit difficult for you guys. Zone 1 up here, Zone 2 down here, Zone 3 right over here. When monster cards are destroyed and when spells and trap cards are used, they are sent face up to the graveyard. The contents of both players' graveyards are public knowledge, and your opponent can look through yours at any time during the duel. The order of the cards in the graveyard should not be changed. The graveyard is shortened in card text to GY. Now, when you are going through your graveyards, you should try not to mess up the order that they are in, because sometimes there are cards that tell you to place the top 5 cards of your graveyard back in your deck, and if you rearrange that, that messes up that thing and technically makes it illegal and makes you get disqualified. So that is why they tell you not to try to change around the graveyard. You could still mill through the graveyard just as long as you place the cards back in the order that you saw them in. Alright, a lot of talking. Green probably can be randomized. Up next is Zone 4, which is your deck. The deck is placed face down in the space. You draw cards from here to add to your hand. If the card effects requires you to reveal a card from your deck or look through it, shuffle it back into your deck and play it in this space afterwards. Up next is the Field Zone, which is on the other side of the Monster Zone, opposite of the Graveyard. Now, this is a special spell zone called the Field Spell Card Zone, and they are placed there. Each player can have 1 field spell card on their side of the field. To use another field spell, you have to send the previous one to the graveyard. Field spell cards do not count towards the 5-card limit of your spell and trap card zone. So basically, you can still have 5 spells and trap cards here, and then you can still put a field spell over here. Now, back in the olden days, with Yu-Gi-Oh, you used to only have 1 field spell on the field. So, like, if I placed one and then my opponent placed one, mine would be destroyed. That used to be the old rule set, but they changed that, again, a long time ago. So now, you can have a field spell and they can have a field spell. However, both effects will be in play during the match. So it's like, oh, if you have one that increases the attack of, let's say, waters by 300, and then theirs has one that increases the attack of fires by 300, both will go into effect. However, there are some cards that will also decrease as well, so those will also go into effect. So you'll have to keep track of what's going on. Just remember that the field spells do do things during the duel, which necessarily it helps if you just try to remember that when you are playing your cards. Sometimes you'll forget that cards can be activated, this and that. I do that mistake a bunch of times, so it's really not that big of a deal. Next is Zone 6, which is the extra deck zone, which is the opposite of your normal deck down by the field and spell trap cards. You place your extra deck face down in this space. You can look at cards through your extra deck during the game. At any time during the duel, extra deck monsters may be summoned to the field from here using special methods. Pendulum monster cards would be sent here from the field to graveyard if they are placed face up. We will get into how pendulums work later on, so I'll explain what that is. And then finally, we have the 7th zone, the extra monster zone, and this is where YuGiOh starts to get different. This is where they changed up the meta so much for YuGiOh, was these 2 zones right up here. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse cursor, but these 2 zones right up here, number 7. This is where you put monsters that are summoned to the field by special methods from the extra deck, like link monsters and fusion monsters. Normally, each player can only use one of these zones. A monster placed in this zone does not count towards your 5 monster limit of your main monster zone. I used to run field spells, just get rid of my friends' field spells. They never helped me. They just hurt them. Okay. But yeah, so basically what this extra zone does, it allows you to summon out the monsters from your extra deck. It does give you an extra zone to use, so you can have 6 monsters on your side of the field rather than just the 5. However, that's why link monsters are so important, because if you just summon a fusion monster, it goes straight to zone 7, but then from there you cannot summon another extra deck monster because you don't have any link monsters to link them up to, because link monsters have arrows on them, and you're allowed to special summon from your extra deck with those cards pointing to those links. I will get into that when we get to the link monsters. I'll go over that rule a little bit more, but as a heads up, this is why the meta has changed so much and why we are also doing this live stream as well. Alright, we are finally getting to the monsters, my dudes. Alrighty, here is the monster cards. You have the card name, the attribute, the level, the type of card that it is, the card number that it is. That really doesn't matter. That just lets you know what set you get it from. You have your attack and defense points, and then the card description. Card name, obviously, is the card's name. When the card's name is mentioned, the card text appears in quotations. If the card has the same name, they are considered to be the same card. Or if it's like, oh, if you have a monster that has dragon in its name, like this would work for that, or something along those lines. Level. Up next, we have 2, which is the level. The level counts is the number of stars here. You can find out the monster's level. For Xyz monsters, the numbers of stars is the ranked of the monsters, which is on the left. We'll get in the ranked in a little bit. But basically, when it comes to levels, you can only summon certain, like, does it go over how to summon monsters? No, it does not. Alrighty. That is why we are here, to talk about this. Or it might. Hold on, I'm stupid. No, it does. We will get in the tribute summon, okay. Levels will go into play in a little bit. I just wanted to make sure that this rule set did go over that. Up next, we have the Area 3, which is your attribute. Every monster has an attribute. This attribute is sometimes important for card effects. There are 6 attributes, but there is a 7th, and the 7th is Divine, which is like the Egyptian god cards. Those are different. They are not necessarily played. That is why they are not mentioned in this, and there's technically only, I guess, 5 Divine cards that are playable. And that'd be Obelisk, Slifer, the Winged Dragon of Ra, Spear mode, and then Winged Dragon of Ra Immortal Phoenix mode. And those are the only 5 cards of Divine. That is why they are not mentioned here, because technically you don't even play those. I do personally play those, but we will get into that later. And the 6 attributes that they have is Dark, Earth, Fire, Wind, Water, and Light. Up next is you have the type of monster. Type is, monsters are divided into various types. Some monsters do specific abilities and have additional information here too, next to their type. Card number, basically it's the identification number. Zone 6 is your attack and defense. Your attack and defense is basically the heart and gold of this game. Basically, the higher the monster's attack, it can destroy another monster. If your defense is higher than an attacking monster's attack, you live, your opponent takes damage unless specified. Up next, you have the card description. Card effects are written here describing the monster's special abilities and how to use them. Normally, the effects of the monsters cannot be used while they are set face down on the field. Yellow normal monster cards do not have effects and have a description written on there that does not affect the game. Alrighty. That is it on how to read a card. Now let us go over how the different monster cards there are. You have first up your normal monsters, aka the vanilla. These are your basic as bitch white cards. They have no effect, and they are just basically monsters to be on the field. They can have high attack, high defense, low defense. Sometimes you have cards that go with them, like magic cards and spell cards and trap cards that kind of help out with those things. But normally, vanilla cards aren't really, like, they're good depending on what they are used for, but necessarily they don't have any effects. So basically, they just look like this. Although, what you're going to see a lot in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is effect monsters. Effect monsters are monsters that have special abilities. The effects are split into 4 categories: continuous, ignition, quick effect, and trigger effect, including flip. Now, what a continuous effect is that the effect is active while the effect monster is face-up on the field. The effect starts when the face-up monster appears on the field and ends once that monster is gone or is no longer face-up. There is no trigger for this activation. These monsters are most useful to have a strategy to protect them while they are on the field. An example is that a monster with 2,000 or less an example of one of these is your effect monster could have an effect like monsters with 2,000 or less attack cannot declare an attack. That is a general effect for a continuous effect card where it says if so-and-so has this, they can't do this. Up next, we have the ignition effect. You use this type of effect just by declaring its activation during your main phase. There are some ignition effects that cost to activate, like discarding cards from your hand, tributing a monster, or paying life points. Because you can choose when to activate these types of effect, it's easy to create combos with them. An example would be, you can tribute this card, then target one monster on the field and destroy that target. That is what an ignition effect is. Up next, we have the quick effect. These are special monster effects that can affect even during your opponent's turn. These types of effects have a spell speed of 2, even though all other monster effects have a spell speed of 1. We will go over spell speed in later on in this explanation. Since it's difficult for your opponent to predict these cards, they can give them an unexpected surprise, formerly called multi-trigger effects. An example is, when an effect is activated, quick effect, you can target one card in your graveyard and special summon it. So basically, it's kind of like a reaction effect. And it pretty much goes off faster than like a card that is used for it. So it's like, oh, if someone used Mystical Space Typhoon, you would activate your quick effect would be quicker than that because it's in response to that. And that's how that would work. Or maybe not Mystical Space Typhoon. I'll have to look into that. Or maybe just like a normal trap card, then you can activate a quick effect to stop that. Trigger effects. These are the next type of effects that we have. These effects are activated at specific times, such as during your standby phase or when a monster is destroyed. These cards can make for some great combos, but it's easier for your opponent to predict what will happen, so they might try to stop you. An example would be when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, target one card on the field and destroy that target. A lot of cards that I have do have trigger effects, whether it's like, oh, milled from the graveyard, and then if it's sent to the graveyard, then it activates something. Trigger effects are good to trick your opponent into. Some of them have to be face up on the field, but if that card is sent to the graveyard, it depends on the effect. Are we back? Are we back? Alright, we're back, which is good. Well, let me just tweet out some things. we are good. For anyone that's coming back, I'm just retweeting out stuff just that way people know that, you know, stream's back. We're just experiencing some technical difficulties. Alright. Everything should be good. Alright. I only wish I knew where we got cut off, so that way we could continue going back over stuff. Trigger effects do that. Flip effects basically when you flip up a monster. Flip effect, as an example, could be draw one card after it is flipped up. Alrighty, up. Jesse, how's it going? Yes, that was true. We were talking about back in the day. We were talking about a long time ago when that would happen. That's not current now. Basically, he said, like, back in the day he used to run that, but that was way back then. Because field spells can now be on both sides of the field. It used to not be like that, unfortunately. Alrighty. The next type of monsters that we have in, that we are going to be going over is Link Monsters. Now, a Link Monster is a new kind of monster with the ability to increase the number of monsters you can summon from your extra deck. In addition to one extra monster zone you can usually use, you can also summon monsters from your extra deck to any of your other main monster zones that this card is linked to, aka points to, with the red arrows that are on it. Link arrows. The Link monsters can apply these effects to cards in the zones that it has lit up. Red Link arrows point to. When a Link monster, red arrow points to monster. Those monsters are linked. When two Link monsters have red arrows that point to each other, they are co-linked. Oh my god, I am very sorry. Link materials. These are Link materials. You need to summon the monsters. Use the recipe printed here to summon Link monsters. Link rating. This is the number of Link arrows that monster has and the number of monsters needed to summon it. Basically, it'll say, like, oh, you need 2+ effect monsters. That generally means that you need 3 monsters. Or if you're using another Link monster that has a link of 2, then you can use that. You go over links. I think it'll go over links more with that kind of stuff, but it might not, but I'll explain it if it doesn't. How to link summon. Check the materials of the Link monsters you want to summon. During your main phase, declare the link that you're summoning. Set to the graveyard. Send the number of face-up monsters in your field to the graveyard equal to the Link rating of that Link monster. They are also matched the material requirements listed on the monster. Place the Link monster from your extra deck in the extra monster zone, or one of the main monster zones that another Link monster points to. If 2 extra monster zones are unavailable, you can choose either one. If two extra monster zones are available, you can choose either one to summon your monster. If there's a Link monster already on the field, you can Link summon a monster from one of your zones that it points to. Now, however, when this goes into effect, this also affects your opponent as well, because you will also, as you can see here, the Decode Talker, it has a arrow that points up. So, necessarily speaking, your opponent can also summon a monster to that zone because that link technically points to their zone as well. Sometimes it'll affect that zone in a way where it's like, oh, if this points to an opponent's zone, that monster is decreased, but if it points to yours is increased, bada bada bada. However, like I said, keep in mind that your opponent can use this to summon monsters into their main monster zone rather than just the other extras deck zone. So keep that in mind when you are Link summoning, and everything should be fine. Link monster bonuses. Special summon to the main monster zone. Monsters summoned from the extra deck normally have to go in the extra monster zone, as I just explained. But Link monsters open up more zones for you to use because every main monster zone that a Link monster points to can also be used to summon monsters from your extra deck. Monsters that start from your extra deck but later end up in the graveyard or banished are summoned from there. Also go in the main monster zone, and you don't need a Link to summon them. That means that if you summon something from your extra deck, it gets sent to the graveyard, and you have a way to bring it back from the graveyard to the field. You don't have to put it in the extra monster zone, which is a good thing to have. Link monsters are already on the field. Link monsters already on the field make great materials. Normally, one monster equals one Link material, but when you use a Link monster that has a material for another Link summon, you can count this as either one monster or as a number of monsters equal to its Link rating. For example, if you want to summon a Link 3 monster that requires 2 or more materials in its recipe, you can either use 3 monsters, each count as 1 material, or use a Link 2 Link monster, which counts as 1 or 2 materials, as the second monster counts as 1 material. So this is basically what I was saying before. You can either get rid of 3 monsters, which is like 1, 2, 3, or if you have a Link monster, that counts as 2 technically because it has a Link rating of 2 next to its name, and then one other monster, and then that counts as 3. Sometimes you're going to need cards that just say you need 3 of each, so necessarily that's technically not allowed. So it depends on what the card says in itself, but there are cards that do run like that as well. More about Link monsters. Link monsters have no defense and cannot ever be put into defense position. They can't be changed to defense position by a card effect. They can't even be flipped into face down defense position. If your opponent has a monster in the extra monster zone, it's still a monster they control, so you can't attack directly. You have to destroy and battle all their monsters first, including the one in the extra monster zone. If you take control of your opponent's monster in the extra monster zone, it moves to your main monster zone. When it goes back to your opponent, it goes to their main monster zone, not the extra zone. As long as the materials meet the requirements of the Link monster you want to summon, you can use a token or trap card that is treated as a monster as a Link material. Remember, when you Link summon, you need to meet 3 goals. 1. The amount of materials you use matches the Link rating. Link monsters count as 1 or their own Link rating. 2. The monster of the materials you use meet the number specified in the material line or recipe. And number 3. The materials match any other requirements in the material line, usually such as an effect monster or a specific type of monster. There are cards that I have that run like that, like the extra hero cards need 2 or more hero monsters. As now you can hear my dog scratching in the background. Up next in this description, my god, we have a lot to go through, is Pendulum Monsters. Pendulum Monster cards are a unique kind of card that blurs the line between monsters and spells. They can be summoned as monsters to attack or defend, or activate them as spell cards in your Pendulum Zones, which are located at the most left and the most right of the spell and trap card zone. And you can use them to activate extra special abilities and allow you to Pendulum Summon. The Pendulum Effect. Now, when you see how the card is laid out, there is 2 different layers of effect. There's the Pendulum Effect, which is when you place it in the Pendulum Zone, which is in the middle of the card. And then you have the Monster Effect, which is at the bottom of the card. Like it says right here, Pendulum Effect, when you play this as a spell card in your Pendulum Zone, you use this effect. Some Pendulum monsters may not have a Pendulum Effect. You have to keep that in mind because sometimes they won't. The Pendulum Scale. The Pendulum Scale is the number that determines which monsters you can special summon during the Pendulum Zone. This monster has a Pendulum Zone. This Pendulum Scale monster has a zone of 1. And then finally, the Monster Effect, where you play it, it acts like a regular monster. It has a Pendulum Effect. How to Pendulum Summon. During your main phase, activate a Pendulum Monster cards as spell cards in your leftmost and rightmost spell and trap card zones. These spell and trap zones also become Pendulum Zones. After you have one of each Pendulum Zone once per turn during your main phase, declare that you're Pendulum Summoning. Check the Pendulum Scales on the side of your 2 Pendulum Monsters. Then special summon as many monsters as you want from your hand and as many face down and as many face up Pendulum Monsters from your extra deck whose levels are between those 2 Pendulum Scales. Now, as you can see in this example that they're showing, they have a Pendulum Scale of 1 and a Pendulum Scale of 8, which means that you can special summon monsters between levels 2 and 7. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 monsters can be summoned. However, level 1s and level 8s cannot be summoned because their Pendulum Scales are those numbers and you cannot exceed those numbers at all. Whenever one of your Pendulum Monsters cards on the field, regardless of which zone it is in, or even if it is a monster or not, would be sent to the graveyard, place it face up on your extra deck instead. You can pendulum summon it back to the field. Later, monster pendulum summoned from the extra deck must be summoned to the extra monster zone or your main monster zone pointed to by a link monster. Most people don't really run pendulums anymore because of how this effect works. But yeah. But I mean, pendulums are still there. People can still use them. It's not all that bad. Up next, we have the XZ's monsters, or XYZ monsters. You can pretty much just say XZ's because that counts, that says it too, but XYZ is technically what it also says as well. XYZ is pronounced as XZ's, see? Pronounced as XZ's are a powerful kind of monster. You get you can summon an XZ's monster whenever you control monsters that are the same level. XZ's monsters start in your extra deck, not in your main deck, and wait for you to call them into action. Materials needed for an XZ summon. XZ's material rank. This is the rank of your XZ's monster. XZ's have ranks instead of levels. Stronger XZ's monsters have higher ranks. This monster has a rank 4 XZ's monster. The materials. These are XZ's materials that you need to summon a monster, and you need to use 2 level 4 monsters to summon this monster out. Materials must be face up before you can use them. How to summon. Summoning school way to special summon from your extra deck. Choose to have an XZ's monster from your extra deck and that you have the right materials for. The materials must be face up on the field. During the main phase, declare that you are XZ summoning and stack the XZ's materials on top of each other. That means you take the 2 cards, instead of sending them to the graveyard, you place them on top of each other. Then you take your XZ's monster and then you place that on top of that. Take the XZ's monster from your extra deck and place it on top of the stacked XZ's materials in the extra monster zone and face up attack or defense. If there's a link monster on the field, you can XZ summon a monster in one of those zones that it points to. Basically, that's what we were saying before. When an XZ's monster tells you to detach a material, you have to take one of the stacked materials beneath from your monster and put it into the graveyard. So basically, that's kind of like the cost of activating an effect from your XZ's monsters, is that you have to take a material off of it in order to do so. Sometimes it doesn't need that effect, like Cyber Dragon Infinity, that bullshit card. You could just take cards and use it and place it underneath it and to add to its materials. Some cards, it's like, alright, you have this effect, get rid of your 2 materials to do this awesome effect, but now you can't do anything else with that card because you don't have any other materials attached to it. And that's how you XZ summon. Oi. I think we're about halfway done with this. Alrighty, up next, guys, is that we have Synchro Monsters. Synchro Monsters are placed in the extra deck separate from the main monster deck. You can special summon powerful Synchro Monsters to the field in an instant just by using the levels of your monsters. They can be Synchro summoned from your extra deck by sending the face-up Tuner Monster and any other of the face-up non-Tuner Monsters from your field to the graveyard, when the sum of all their levels is exactly equal to the level of the Synchro Monster. As you can see here in this example, it's a level 3 and a level 2 that make this level 5 card, which means that you can summon this card also because its recipe says so. What up, Sparkle? How's it going? Tuner Monsters for Synchro Summon. In order to Synchro Summon a Synchro Monster, you need 1 Tuner. Look for a Tuner next to its type. So it'll be like Warrior Tuner Effect. It can't just be like any card. It will have to specify that it's a Tuner. The Tuner Monster and other face-up monsters you use for Synchro Summon are called Synchro Materials. The sum of their levels is the level of Synchro Monsters you can summon. Like I said, level 3, level 2, add those up, that's 5. You can special summon this level 5 Link Monster because you have those exact levels. This is basically how you Link Summon. Like I said, it's 3, 2, 5. There are other specific things depending on the Synchro card, but this is just a basic way to Synchro Summon. Alrighty. Finally, it's time to get to the classic, the OG, the cream of the crop, the Neapolitan of Yu-Gi-Oh! The Fusion Monsters. Fusion Monsters were great back in the day. Nowadays, they're kind of just like meh. But back in the day, oof, when you would summon out a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, you would just, nothing could compare to that. But like it says in this description, my dudes, Fusion Monsters are also placed in your extra deck, not in the main deck. They are summoned by using specific monsters listed on the card called Fusion Materials combined with the summoning card like Polymerization. Nowadays, you don't really need Polymerization, depending on if the card says you don't need to use Polymerization. It could just say Special Summon. They usually have some special abilities and very high attack points as well. Since Fusion Monsters require specific cards, be sure to include those necessary cards in your main deck. An example would be Elemental Hero Flame Wingman. He needs Elemental Hero Avion and Elemental Hero Barstanastrix in order to Fusion Summon him. How to Fusion Summon. If you have all the Fusion materials listed on the Fusion Monster card and the places specified in the summoning card, you can activate your summoning card by placing it in the spell and trap zone. Send the fusion materials to the graveyard and then take the appropriate fusion monster from your extra deck and place it in the extra monster zone in either face up, attack, or defense, or if you have a link, you can place it in that zone as well. Finally, place your summoning card in the Finally, place your summoning card in your graveyard. Another card effect causes your fusion material to be sent to a place other than the graveyard. Then your summoning card resolves, sending them to that other place, but the fusion summon still happens anyway. If there's a link monster on the field, you can fusion summon and fusion summon to a thing that points to. Alrighty, that's pretty much cards from your extra deck. Now we're going to get into a ritual card. Ritual cards are a little bit different. These are monsters that actually go into your deck, as I'm going to read in the description. Ritual monsters are special monsters that are special summoned with a specific ritual spell card along with the required tribute. Ritual monster cards are placed in the main deck and cannot be summoned unless you have all the proper cards together in your hand or on the field. Ritual monsters generally have a high attack and defense and have some special abilities, just like fusion monsters. Basically, besides fusion back in the day, rituals were also a great thing to have. Basically, be like, oh, you need to sacrifice, yo, what up, Deadless Doggy? Basically, you need to sacrifice up to whatever it says in order to do the effect. You also need the ritual monster in your hand. If it is specified that you don't need it in your hand, then that's great. But generally, you're going to need it in your hand in order to summon it. How to ritual summon. In a ritual spell card, along with the matching ritual monster card in your hand, along with the required tribute as listed on the ritual spell card, you can activate the ritual spell card, placing it in the spell and trap zone. If the activation of the ritual spell card is successful, tribute monsters by sending them to your hand or field to the graveyard. The ritual spell card will list the required amount to tribute. After sending the tributed monsters to the graveyard, play the ritual monster card in your main monster zone, either face-up attack or defense position, and finally place the ritual spell card in your graveyard. Now keep in mind, with rituals, my favorite is Synchro Summon, nice. Now keep in mind, with ritual summons, they do not necessarily work with links. You can still summon them to whatever monster zone you want to. You don't even have to summon them to the extra monster zone. So rituals are like this neat little, like, what's it called? Where you can bend the rule a little bit. They're the loophole of summoning out higher level monsters. Because they're not from the extra deck, you don't need to summon them to your extra monster zone or use them to summon them to the zone where a link monster would summon. So ritual monsters are this neat little niche thing that you can use. I do have a ritual monster deck which is comprised of only ritual monsters, mostly the Blackluster Soldier archetype, and it has no other extra cards, which is pretty neat because, you know, I can just summon these to my 5 monster zones and I don't really need to use the extra monster zone at all. So that's, like I said, it's a neat little thing. Some people play with it, some people don't. It's up to you. They cheese the game a little bit. I don't know what you're asking, Deadless Doggy. I feel like it's terminology that I'm not entirely sure of. Because I is a stupid boy. Remember, now I can actually visualize, because your brain like this, my brain like this. But yeah, there are different ways to summon monsters. There are several ways to play monsters on the field. These can be categorized into 2 groups. Actions can be done only once per turn, and actions can be done multiple times per turn. Normal summon. This is the most common way to summon a monster. Simply play 1 monster from your hand to the field in face-up attack position, all from your hand onto the field in face-up defense position anymore. Why does this... Alright. Okay, we're good. I hate that it disconnects. Why are you disconnecting? Aquafiend Ritual deck or Blacklisted Soldier comprised of a few rituals, some Gaia cards that act as support. Oh, I have a pure Blacklister Soldier deck. That is what I have. I don't do the Aquafiend Ritual deck. Alrighty. We went over normal summon. We went over normal set. Up next is Tribute Summon. For monsters that are level 5 or higher, must be tributed at least one monster you control before you normal summon or set. This is called the Tribute Summon. Monsters that are level 5 or 6 require 1 tribute, and level 7 and higher require 2 tributes. Now, what it doesn't normally tell you, because not a lot of people have the cards that I'm about to say, it's level 5 to 6 is 1, level 7 to 9 is 2, and then level 10 to 12 is 3. I bring this up because Egyptian God cards are 10, and you need 3 monsters to summon them. Just saying. If you tribute summon in face-down defense position, this is called a tribute set. Monster tribute set on the field is not considered summoned. When a card explains a special method to tribute summon a monster, you can also tribute set that monster by the same method. Flip summon is basically when you have a monster face down and it is attacked or flipped face up by using card effect. That is called a flip summon. And you cannot change the monster to flip. When you flip summon, you cannot change the monster to face up defense position, only face up attack position. Monster card cannot be flipped summoned in the same turn that it was set onto the field. You cannot use monster effects until they are face up. The only thing that is different about that effect is basically when you're attacking a face down defense position monster, it is still flipped face up, but stays in defense position. It is not flipped to attack position. The only time a face down defense position monster is flipped in the face up attack position is on your turn. So turn 1, you put it face down. Next turn, your opponent does nothing. Goes back to your turn. Your turn, you could take that face down card and flip it face up. But you have to flip it face up in attack position. You can't just flip it in defense position. And the same goes vice versa. Like if you summon in attack position, on your next turn, you can put it into defense position to save your life points. But you can't flip it face down once it has been flipped face up, unless specified by an effect of a card. Special summon. Some monsters can be played onto the field without being normal summoned or set. This is called a special summon. Pendulum summons, XC summons, Synchro, Fusion, and Ritual summons are all special summons. Some effect monsters also have specific conditions that allow you to special summon them. Unless otherwise specified, a special summoned monster is played onto the field in your choice if face-up attack position or face-up defense position. That is also a variant of the rule. Face-up defense special summons allows you to summon a monster face-up attack or face-up defense. You can't do it face-down defense. Special summon with card effects. Monsters can also be special summoned onto the field through the effect of another card. This is different from special summon monsters. You cannot use a card effect to special summon those monsters from your hand, deck, or graveyard unless it was properly special summoned first. For example, if a synchro monster is sent from your extra deck to the graveyard without being synchro summoned, you cannot use a spell card to special summon it from the graveyard because synchro monsters have to be properly special summoned first before they can be special summoned by card effects, which you don't necessarily see a lot of that specific thing, but that's a pretty decent example, I guess. Alrighty. Okay, we are finally up to the spell and trap cards. Jesus Christ. Spell and trap cards are a different breed of cards. They go into the zone at the bottom. We're not spell card is specified by this little thing. Its color, its icon, card name. Remember the card name considered top set cards. You can only have 3 copies of the same card in main deck or side deck combined. Instead of having to attribute the symbol like monster cards, spell cards has a spell symbol and the trap cards has a trap symbol. There are 6 different types of icons that represent special properties a spell or trap card may have. Spell and trap cards without an icon are called normal spell cards and normal trap cards. However, there are spell and trap cards that have these symbols on them. For example, you have the equip symbol, the field symbol, the quick play symbol, ritual, continuous, and counter. Each card's activation contains activation conditions and effects are provided here in the zone 4, basically kind of like what an effect monster is. Same thing with the number, and it's a little bit easier to understand how a field and spell, how to see what a spell and trap card look like. Back in the day, they were actually called magic cards, and now they're called spell cards. So that's a neat little tidbit that I'd like to drop for you guys. So basically, this is what a spell trap. They work differently, and I really hope, and it's going to explain how the rules are. Alrighty. Spell cards. Spell cards can normally be activated only during your main phase and help you out with different effects. Spell cards have many powerful effects like destroying other cards or strengthening monsters. Save these cards in your hand until you get the best results out of them, because they can only be generally activated on your turn unless specified by one of the different types by these little icons. So like a quick play could be played from your field on your opponent's turn, or a counter as well. None of the rest can do so. Normal spell cards have single use. To use a normal spell card, announce its activation to your opponent, placing it face up on the field. If the activation succeeds, then you resolve the effect written on the card. After resolving the effect, send the card to the graveyard. Ritual spell cards. These spell cards are used to perform ritual summons. These cards are in the same way they use normal spell cards. Teaching Yu-Gi-Oh! Are we sweet? Yes, we are, Mech Alex. And we finally got through all the goddamn monsters. We're finally to spells and traps. Yeah, spell cards use these as ritual summon cards. That's how you know that. Continuous spell cards. These cards remain on the field once they are activated, and their effect continues while the card stays face up on the field. By using continuous spell cards, you can create lasting positive effects with a single card, which is great, but there is a chance that the opponent will remove it from the field before you benefit from the effect. Up next, we have equip spell cards. These cards are given extra effect to one face-up monster of your choice, either your own or opponent's, depending on the card. They remain on the field after they are activated, and the equip spell card effects only affect one monster, and it's called the equipped monster, but still occupies one of your spell and trap card zones. If possible, place it in the zone directly behind the equipped monster to help you remember. If the equipped monster is destroyed, flipped face down, or removed from the field, the equipped spell card is destroyed. Up next, we have the field spell card. These cards go in the field zone and stay there. Each player can have one field spell card on their own side of the field to use another field spell. Send your previous one to the graveyard. Many field spell effects apply to both players. These cards can be placed face down in the field zone, but are not active until flipped face up. Up next, we have the quick play spell card. These special spell cards can be activated during any phase of your turn, not just your main phase. You can also activate them during your opponent's turn if you set the card face down first, but then you cannot activate the card in the same turn you set it. So basically, if you have a quick play spell card and you place it down, you do stuff, your opponent says something, you technically cannot activate that card because you set it. It's a weird rule. I don't like that, but that's the rule. Yeah. But however, you can activate quick play spell cards from your hand just by normal. But that's actually pretty interesting. You can activate it from your hand. Didn't know that. I technically didn't know that. So it's like if it's in your hand, something happens, you can boom, do that. So technically, you don't, setting it only helps if you're doing it on your opponent's turn. But if it's in your hand, your opponent does something, then bam, you can actually play that from your hand. That's actually pretty interesting to know. Up next is we have trap cards. Trap cards help you out with different effects, just like spell cards. The big difference between them is that you can activate trap cards during your opponent's turn. Many spell cards have effects useful for offense, but trap cards have abilities that surprise an opponent by disrupting their attacks and strategies. Using trap cards can sometimes be tricky since your opponent might have to do certain things before you can unleash them. Normal trap cards. Before you can activate a trap card, it must be set on the field first. You cannot activate the trap card the same turn that you set it, but you can activate it at any time after that, starting from the beginning of the next turn. Basically the same way that the quick play spell card is played, that is how a normal trap card is played. Normal trap cards have single-use effects, and once their effects are resolved, they can be sent to the graveyard just like normal spell cards. That can vary depending on what the trap card says on it. They are also similar to normal spell cards because once activated, their effects are not likely to be stopped. However, your opponent can destroy your face-down trap cards on the turn that they are set before the time is right before you can activate them. Because of this, you must be smart on how to use your trap cards. Aye. Whew. Just like continuous spell cards, continuous trap cards remain on the field once they are activated, and their effects continue while they are face up on the field. Some continuous trap cards have abilities similar to ignition effects or trigger effects that can be found in effect monster cards. Continuous trap cards can have an effect that limits your opponent's options or that slowly damages your opponent's life points. Up next is the counter trap cards. Counter trap cards are normally activated in response to an activation of another card and may have an ability that negating the effect of those cards. These types of traps are effective against normal spell cards and normal trap cards, which are otherwise hard to stop. However, many counter trap cards require cost to activate them. Alrighty, the difference between set spell cards and set trap cards. Spell cards can be set face down on the field like trap cards. However, the rules for the two types are different. Spell cards can be activated during the main phase even if it is the same turn that you set them, except for quick play spell cards. Setting them does not allow you to use them on your opponent's turn. They could still only be activated during your main phase. And you actually have two main phases. We will go over that in the next section. You can set a spell card face down on the field to bluff your opponent into thinking you have a powerful trap card. So that's pretty much what that is used for. And that's basically the difference between magic, spell, and trap cards. Up next, we're going to get into how to duel. But before we get into that, I'm just going to go grab a cup of water. So I will be right back, everyone. So just sit tight for a minute or two while I just go get some water. Drain myself of all the water that I drank. And like I said, I will be right back. And we will be getting back into how to play the game. Well, after we explained how to do all the card stuff. Alrighty, see you in a few seconds, guys. Back better than ever. Tripping over all my wires. Alrighty. Now that we went over how to use, please don't disconnect. Now that we went over what monster cards are, what different types of monster cards there are, and the magic and spell cards and trap cards, we are now going to get into how to play the game. Jesus Christ. How to play. Let the duel begin. How to duel and how to win. A single game is called a duel, and the duel ends when one player wins the game and ends in the draw. Duels are played in sets of 3 called a match, and the winner of best 2 out of 3 wins the match. Winning a duel. Each player starts a duel with 8,000 life points, otherwise known as LP. No extra deck run through. We already went through the extra deck stuff. Those are the different monsters. You missed that. As you can, yeah. Yeah, we went over all of this first. So I went over the deck, the extra deck, side deck, the different monsters, spell cards, and yada yada yada. Now we're up to here. Yeah, sorry, you missed that out. Each player starts a duel with 8,000 life points. You win a duel if you reduce your opponent's life points to 0, or if your opponent is unable to draw a card, or if a card's special effect lets you win. If you and your opponent both reach 0 at the same time, the duel is declared a draw. Conditions vary, reduce your opponent's life to 0, blah, 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 or win by card effect. Basically, the main way that you're going to win is by reducing your opponent's life points to 0. That is basically the bread cutter. The one very important rule people should learn is the if-when rule. I'm going to need you to remind me what that rule is, because I might have went over it. Again, terminology, not all that good. I might have said it and didn't realize it. You might have to explain it to me. But yeah, like I was saying, this is the bread and butter way of winning. The other way is to pretty much stall out your opponent. That's usually for people who have decks that have like higher level, that have higher card decks. So that way you could stall out your opponent a little bit longer than they could stall you out. And then the other is win cards by special effect. That is like cards like Exodia, Final Countdown, the final cards, and other various match-winning cards that have those effects. Preparing a duel. Before starting a duel, follow these 4 steps. Also make sure you have all your extra items in your deck you might need, like a coin or counters. Step 1, after greeting your opponent, shuffle your deck thoroughly. Then you may shuffle and cut your opponent's deck. Be careful when touching your opponent's cards. After cutting, place the decks face down, the proper deck zones on the field. If using extra decks, place them in the extra face down deck zone. Both players each show their side decks and record the number of cards, and it also confirming that they have 15 or fewer cards. The set cards should be counted face down. If you exchange cards between your side and main decks after the duel, count the cards in your side deck for your opponent again to show that the number of cards remain the same. When will miss the timing, if won't miss the timing. Oh, so it's like, if this happens, this is going to happen. And then when this happens, then it's going to happen. So it's basically before and after. Okay, that's basic things. Alright. But yeah, basically that's triggers and ignitions. Or, yeah. I think we went over that before in the effect cards. Yeah, ignition, trigger, quick, and flip. Essentially is what that was. Both players show your deck. So basically when you're adding cards from your side deck to your main deck, you want to have the same amount of cards in your deck rather than just add and subtract. But yeah, that's thing 3. Thing 4 is play rock, paper, scissors, or flip a coin. The winner decides to go first or second in the duel for your next duels. The loser of the previous duel decides who goes first. Yeah, that's basically what it was. Like what we said. Like ignition, trigger. Yeah, that's all there. That's not really a rule. That's just kind of like what it says on there. Yeah, that's all there. We basically went over that. The winner decides to go first or second in the duel. For the first For your next duels, the loser of the previous duel decides who goes first or second. If the previous duel ends in a tie, determines who starts the next off, another coin costs, etc. Finally, draw 5 cards from the top of your deck and let this shit begin. Alrighty. Turn structure. Duel progresses in these different phases. Draw phase, standby phase, main phase 1. Main phase 1, battle phase, main phase 2, and end phase. Keep in mind you can go from main phase 1 to end phase, but that's only if you don't conduct a battle phase. So that means you can't do main phase 1 and then skip to main phase 2. You have to, you can't do main phase 1 and then go to main phase 2 if you didn't battle. You have to go straight to end phase if you choose not to battle. However, if you do choose the battle, then you go to main phase 2, which lets you follow up with stuff after your battle. So it's like, alright, something happened after the battle, then you can place this card face down to end your turn. And that's essentially when you would like to play your magic, your quick play spell cards is in your main phase 2. So that way it's kind of like after all the main shit has happened, main phase 2 happens, you're like, alright, now I'll do this. And then you end your turn. And then after that, it goes into the second player's turn. Draw phase. The first phase, players whose turn it is, draws 1 card from the top of your deck. The player with no cards left in their deck is unable to draw cards, loses the duel. After you draw, trap cards or quick play spell cards can be activated before proceeding to the standby phase. Important player who goes first cannot draw during the draw phase of their first turn. Main action of this phase, draw 1 card. Possible other actions, activate spell cards, quick plays cards, blah, blah, blah. Some cards have effects that activate or cost you must pay in standby phase. If you don't have any of these cards on the field, you can still activate trap cards or quick play spell cards before moving into your main phase 1. Resolve card effects that happen in this phase. Activate spell card, blah, blah, blah. So basically, there are going to be cards that says, oh, during your standby phase, gain 1,000 life points because of blah, blah, blah. So basically, the standby phase is the phase where nothing really happens unless it is specified by an effect. Or you can do it literally after their draw phase, and then it goes into standby phase. And that's when you can activate stuff during the standby phase before they get into their main phase, before they start actually playing cards. So just keep that in mind. When you're actually dueling. The only other time that you can actually activate stuff during their main phase is if they are trying to do something in reaction. Because technically once they're sitting there waiting and they're not doing anything, that's when their standby phase is. Only after when they're starting to place cards down, that's their main phase. Just as a general heads up. Main phase 1, this is where you play most of your cards. You can normal summon, set, or change the battle position of monster, activate card effect, set, spell, and trap cards, and other special summons of said nature. These actions can be done in any order that you want, but some actions have restrictions. I don't really have to go over how to play cards in your main monster zones. Basically, your main phase is where you can activate and set your spell, trap cards, your monsters, effects, special summon, fusion summon. All that stuff is usually done in your main phase 1. And that's just pretty much a quick rundown. I don't need to sit here and read all this, because that's just the general senses of what it is. Now, the battle phase is now the time to battle for your monster cards. This phase is divided into 2 steps. You do not have to conduct a battle phase every turn, even if you have monsters on the field, unless specified by a card effect, where it's you have to have monsters that attack. The player who goes first cannot conduct the battle phase on their first turn. Basically, turn 1, obviously because your opponent has no monsters or anything, you can't attack them directly, because then you could just win right there. That would make the game literally broken. Player who goes first, possible action, battle with monsters, activate trap cards, and quick play spell cards. Basically, the only time you can activate spell, trap cards, and quick play cards during a battle phase is literally during the battle phase. Because sometimes it's specified, but while you're in battle phase, you can't activate your normal spell cards or yeah, you can't activate normal spell cards in there. You can only activate your quick play spell cards and trap cards. Start of the step is you go to that battle step. The battle phase is split into 4 steps and conducted in order shown in the diagram. So basically, you start the step, you go into the battle step, you choose the card that wants to attack, you conduct the battle, then it goes to damage step unless specified by another card. And then after damage step, you go back to battle step to attack with your other monsters, because all of your monsters can attack 1 each unless specified on a card, like Vision Hero Trinity can attack up to 3 times, or there are cards that you have that can attack up to every monster 1 time, depending on the card, generally speaking. And then after that, you go to the end step of the battle phase. Then you go into main phase 2, which is basically a repeat of main phase 1. Whatever you didn't do in main phase 1, you can do in main phase 2. Then you can go to the end phase. There's a lot of rules. I was not expecting this. Oi. But yeah, like I said, like it says right here, main phase 2 is basically the stuff that you didn't do in main phase 1, or stuff that you want to do after your battle phase that you didn't want to do in main phase 1. You do that in main phase 2. The end phase is basically where you just end your turn. If there is a special rule, though, for the amount of cards that you can have in your hand. If you have more than 6 cards in your hand at the end of this phase, select and discard cards to the graveyard until you only have 6 cards in your hand. So basically, like, if you end your turn, you have 7 cards in your hand, you have to discard one of those cards to the graveyard. You can only have 6 cards in your hand, which is sometimes good if you want to have something in the graveyard and you have, like, all this stuff in your hand. You can just get rid of something to the graveyard. But that also takes place in just, like, in general, like, having, like, Slifer the Sky Dragon, he runs off of having attack points based on the number of cards in your hand. So, like, at max, he can have 6,000. But, like, during your turn, like, obviously he'll have 7,000, but by the end of that turn, you have to discard, so he'll be back down to 6,000, but that's still pretty goddamn strong, having 6,000 level monster. But yeah. That's just something to keep in mind. There are different ways of damaging your opponent. Basically, you can damage your opponent by attacking their attack position monster. Damage is calculated because their attack and your attack is different. Whoever has the highest attack wins. The lower attack monster is destroyed. And then, basically from there, your opponent takes life point damage from the difference between their attacks. If you attack a defense position monster, no battle damage is conducted unless specified by a card that has a piercing effect. So, like, if a card says, like, oh, if this attacks a defense position monster, it does piercing damage, which means that you do the same thing that you do for attack, except for defense. So it's like if a monster has 1,000 attack and 1,000 defense, and it's in defense position, and you have a monster with 2,000 attack, and it has piercing damage, then your opponent is still going to take 1,000 damage because your monster has the piercing damage effect. And then there's attacking your opponent directly, which is literally when they don't have any monsters, your opponent just takes the full brunt force of that monster's attack, which is generally what you'll tend to do when your opponent has no monsters on the field. There are different damage step rules, as you can see here. Limitations on activating cards during the damage step. You can only activate counter trap cards or cards with effects that directly change a monster's attack or defense. Also, these cards can only be activated up until the start of the damage calculation. Attacking a face down card. If you attack a face down defense position monster, flip the card face up in defense division in the damage step. Now you can see the monster's defense and then calculate damage. Activation of flip effect. When an attacked monster is flipped face up, any flip effects are activated and resolved after damage calculation. If you need to select a monster or flip effect to target, you cannot target a monster that has already been destroyed during the damage calculation. So yeah, there's that. There's more rules, blah, blah, blah. Just go to here. Determining damage, like we just went over before. When you attack, attack. Your monster's attack exceeds your opponent's monsters. Their life points is subtracted from the difference between those monsters. The only other difference is basically if the attacks are tied, then both monsters are destroyed, but no one takes any battle damage. However, if you attack a monster with higher attack, your monster is going to get destroyed and you take life points damage, so you try not to do that. But now with when you're attacking a defense position monster, though, so like I said before, if you're attacking a defense position monster, they don't take any battle damage, and the destroyed defense position monster goes to the graveyard. However, if they have a monster that has a higher defense than your attack, then you take life point damage. However, neither monster is destroyed unless specified by an effect. If both of the attack and defense points are tied, then no one takes any damage and nothing is destroyed. General rule of thumb. Up next, we're going to get up to chains and spell speed. What is a chain? Because most people don't really know what a chain is or how they work, but here we go. Chains are the way to order the resolution of multiple card effects. They are used when the effects of more than one card are activated at once, or when a player wants to use an effect after a card has been played, but before that card has an effect on the game. If a card effect is activated, your opponent is always given a chance to respond to that card effect with their own, creating a chain. If your opponent responds with an effect, then you can choose to respond and add another effect to the chain. If your opponent does not respond, you may activate a second effect and create a chain to your own card's activation. Both players continue to add effects to the chain until they both wish to add nothing else. Then you resolve the outcome in reverse order, starting with the last card that was activated. You must always be careful not to resolve the effects of your cards before asking your opponent if they wish to make a chain. Spell speed. Every type of card effect has a spell speed between 1 and 3. If you want to respond to a card effect in a chain, you have to use an effect with a spell speed 2 or higher, and it cannot have a lower spell speed than the effect you are responding to. See page 41 for an introduction of each card's spell speed. Didn't really see that there, but okay. Alrighty, spell speeds. Spells, trap, and monster effects have different spell speeds, and their spell speeds are from 1 to 3. You can only respond to an effect of a spell speed 2 or higher, and has an equal or greater spell speed than the effect of the chain link before it. Spell speed 1. Spells. Normal spells. Normal, equip, continuous, field, ritual, effect, monster effects, ignition, trigger, and flip. This is the slowest of all speed spells. These cards cannot be activated in response to any other effect. Typically, these effects cannot be chain link 2 or higher unless multiple spell speed 1 effects are activated simultaneously. Spell speed 2. Traps. Normal and continuous. Quick play spells, and then your monster's quick effects. These cards are used to respond to a spell speed of 1 or 2 effect and can typically be activated during any phase. Finally, we have a spell speed of 3, and there's only one thing in here, and that is the counter trap. This is the fastest of all speed spells and can be used to respond to a card of any speed spell. Only another spell speed 3 card may be used in response to these cards. So basically, if there's nothing that can outplay a counter trap, then it can't be used. How a chain works. Chain 1, spell speed 1 or 2 that is used. Spell speed 3 that is chained against thing. Yep, see, it just continues going up and up and up and up and up until the chain is completed, and then it is resolved in the reverse order. As shown in the diagram above, the first effect is activated in the chain link 1, the next effect is chain link 2, and so on every time new cards is made. They stack up in the order that the card resolves and activated. Once the chain is complete, the outcome is resolved starting with the most recent card to be activated at the top of the chain, proceeding down to chain link 1. Here's an example of a chain. A player plays Heavy Storm. Player A plays Heavy Storm, and player B responds by activating their set Threatening Roar. Then player A responds to that by activating 7 Tools of the Bandit. And then the chain is played in reverse order. So 7 Tools of the Bandit negates the effect of Threatening Roar, which means that Threatening Roar's effect can't go off because this effect went off first, thus stopping Threatening Roar from happening, and then Heavy Storm can come in and destroy all spell and trap cards on the field. Turn player's priority. The turn players always start with priority or the choice to activate a card first in each phase or step of their turn. As long as the turn player is priority, the opponent cannot activate cards or effects except for the effect of that activate automatically, like trigger and flip effects. The turn player can either 1. Use a priority to play a card or activate an effect, or pass priority to an opponent so they can activate an effect. A player must pass priority to an opponent when moving on to the next phase or step. Strictly speaking, you can always declare that you are passing priority before the end of every phase and step and ask your opponent if they wish to play a card. However, for ease of play, announcing the end of your phase or steps implies giving up priority. Therefore, when announcing the end of a phase, your opponent can just say, before the end of your phase, I activate this card and use the card. The turn player starts with priority to activate a card or effect first. After the card's activation and at the end of each phase or step, priority passes to the opponent. And that's how priority works. We are now going to get into number 5, which is the other rules. Forbidden and limited cards, we went over this before. Normally a deck including extra deck and side deck can contain up to 3 copies of a card of the same name. However, certain cards have specific quantity restrictions that further limit the number that can be included in the deck. There are 3 types of restricted. Limited cards are restricted to 1 copy. Semi-limited is cards restricted to 2 copies. And then forbiddens are not allowed to be included at all. There is a list of forbidden and limited cards, and it is updated regularly and is posted on the official TCG YuGiOh website. The list is applied to official tournaments, so please check before participating. This is why all of my decks are tournament legal, because I just want to make sure that I'm playing with the correct cards, because last time me and my friend played, Alright. That's that. Monster tokens, they are not cards that necessarily appear on the field unless used by specific effects. Their battle positions in either face-up attack or face-up defense. Tokens cannot be used as Xyz materials. They can be used for other stuff, though, unless specified. So that's how that works with tokens. Public knowledge. Player number of cards in the player's deck or hand and the cards in the graveyard. Each currently public knowledge. Players conduct actions simultaneously. When multiple cards activate simultaneously. 0 attack monsters. Rules and cards effects. Leaves the field. Xyz materials. Basically just all these other general things that happen. There's a glossary that we're not going to have to go over. But generally speaking, that is all the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I understand that this has been a 2-hour discussion. I didn't think it was going to take this long to discuss all of Yu-Gi-Oh! But unfortunately, that is what happened. We went over the official rulebook of Yu-Gi-Oh! But yeah, that was quite a thing. And my hair is a goddamn mess. And I hit my microphone. But yeah, guys, generally that is how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is played. honestly, if you guys have any questions and stuff, just leave them in the comment section below, and I will definitely try to answer them. Because not a lot of people are here right now, so like I said, just put it in the comment section what you any questions that you have after watching this. I understand it's a 2-hour video, but if it helps you understand how the rules are played for Yu-Gi-Oh, then any little help that I can do, that's all I'm looking to do. But I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion. This is probably one of the longest Crimson University videos I've ever done. But with that, guys, I will see you later because I do have to go and do stuff. Yes, McAlex, what is your issue? What is your question? What was a long pause? I'm very confused. Oh, with me texting on my phone, that was, I had to answer a text message. But yeah. Alright. But like I said, guys, any questions that you have to ask me, put them in the comments section so that way I can see them and I will respond to them as quickly as I can. I hope that this helps you guys understand how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And hopefully it'll get you guys into playing Yu-Gi-Oh! It's not a simple game. It can be a simple man's game when you're playing at a base level. There's obviously beginner, intermediate, and then there's professional level. I play on a professional level because those are the cards that I have. Sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's not, and I sit there and I'm just like, I just keep on losing. Why can't I just do a fucking combo? But then there's times where it's like, you know, you're having a good back and forth, and that just generally depends on what you have going on. But with that, guys, this is where we're going to end this video. So I do appreciate you guys coming out here and watching this again. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for everyone who donated. I really appreciate that. And for anyone who's new and subscribed to the channel, thank you. You guys are all awesome and amazing. And with that, I will see you guys later. I'll try to go live later tonight again, maybe with some Pokemon Showdown or something. But with that, I will see you guys. And as always, good gaming. God bless. Go beyond and keep on keeping on. And now, because we are at this point, I'm going to then play the Crimson University outro. So I'll see you guys later.